Welcome to the Trust Factor Radio, bringing you interviews and insights to unlock the power of the subconscious mind to create authority, credibility, and trust. With your host, the Authority Architect and best-selling author, Neil Howe.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today my special guest is Stephanie LeVonne. She is a senior account manager at Elite SEM, where she helps establish brands with increasing their organic presence, migrating and replatforming of websites, and improving authoritativeness in the minds of consumers. Stephanie began doing SEO in 2012 and is also a writer for Search Engine Land, where she her latest predictions for everything SEO related, and one of her specialties is CRO, or conversion rate optimization, which she uses to create a blended approach when helping her clients with site redesigns, layouts, and A/B testing. Well, there's certainly a lot to talk about there. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be speaking today.
Excellent. Well, give us a little bit about yourself and your background before we get into who it is that you help.
Sure. So I started dabbling in SEO actually back in 2012. And this was when I took an internship with a small startup in Brooklyn. So at the time I was still in school and I was looking for a job, and I actually landed a position with this media planning and buying agency in New York. It was a pretty big company, so I was excited to get my feet wet with that. I was with them for about a year, and at this point I started to realize that a lot of the technology we were using there and a lot of the platforms were really just outdated. And so I tried to make the switch over to digital, but as it turned out at that company, it was pretty siloed, and I think it's probably still that way today. There's a lot of division between both the digital and the traditional side. So I started looking for external opportunities, and I really just went back to the drawing board. What did I do in college that really sparked my interest? And one of the things was that internship. So I just started looking for roles based around SEO in New York, and was fortunate enough to land a position with my current company, which is Elite SEM. And I've been there about 4 years as of February.
Excellent. Well, tell me a little bit what Elite SEM does.
Awesome. So Elite SEM was founded on PPC, so paid search, as you can tell by our name, Elite Search Engine Marketing. But over the years, we've really diversified our service offerings. So now we have a whole host of divisions. So it's not only paid search, but there's SEO, there's CRO, there's display, there's analytics. And most recently, we've had several acquisitions with Amazon PPC companies and also email marketing companies. So we've really expanded our services a lot over the years. And so it's not just SEM, which is a common misconception when a lot of clients first interact with us, but just a lot of services pertaining to digital.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing about the mergers and acquisitions and how that affects everything. But, tell us more about the kind of business that you typically help at Elite SEM.
So we typically work with mid to larger sized clients. I think we're scaling more towards working with those larger brands in the coming years. But a good client is someone who is already pretty established in the industry. I'll just throw out an example. Say maybe Target would be a great example. So a website that's pretty established. They have, people in-house managing the digital strategy, and someone that can really devote time to a specific channel. So someone that can actually get on a call with us every week and talk SEO. They don't have to be super knowledgeable. That's where we step in and kind of provide that guidance, but just someone who's managing the channel, essentially.
So big companies like that, what kind of problems are they usually dealing with?
So we do work with a lot of e-commerce clients, as it would probably seem, but there's also clients that just dabble in lead gen, or maybe it's just a blog with no e-commerce whatsoever. And the problems that they usually have, it really ranges from anything, content related to the technical side. And usually with these larger brands, we get into a lot of those more technical, foundational and structural issues. And those are usually things that clients tend to overlook, because as it usually plays out at a company, the marketing manager is not, having the same skill set or knowledge as their dev team. So we kind of bridge that gap and find, the pieces that are broken and help to solve those problems.
All right, well, let's dive into some of this technical stuff because, like you said, creating content is one thing, and maybe getting backlinks or developing relationships to get those, social media likes and shares and everything is something. But, when it comes to the technical stuff, there's just some people are great at that and others are not. There's probably a lot more that are not. So tell us about some of these technical issues and how important they are to get fixed for especially big companies like that.
Mm-hmm. So one issue that we see a lot of is really just around e-commerce sites and their use of like redirects or even canonical tags. So specifically, if they've migrated from an old website to a new website, it's unfortunate that a lot of the times that link equity isn't really carried over with redirects, or maybe those redirects were done improperly. So I'd say that's probably a big one. And also for e-commerce, there's usually a lot of duplicate pages built for the same product. So for example, a lot of fashion brands will have color variations that live on their own landing page. And what happens is that all those landing pages really end up competing against themselves in the SERP and hurting their own chances of ranking. So it's just those small things like tagging on the back end and making sure everything's really buttoned up. And also with big sites, sometimes there's a need to want to take a lot of different brands and roll them all up into one website, kind of like a website consolidation or a merger. Now, from an SEO perspective, this is a little bit messy. From a brand perspective, it can help to unify things and provide some more clarity for consumers. But you have to really be mindful because there's certain elements that you're going to lose on the search results page, specifically speaking to your knowledge graph panel, for example. So the knowledge graph panel is usually that little bit of information that appears on the right-hand side that details out your brand's company name, and then it will also say the location, and there's usually a little bit of a pull in there from Wikipedia with some additional details, and then down below your social profiles. So essentially, if you're going to be merging a lot of different websites together, what happens is you might actually lose that knowledge graph result in the SERP. So what we're after is really just helping you preserve your brand presence.
Okay, that is definitely getting into some complex situations there when you're merging different kinds of companies or brands. Go a little bit more into that. What do the brands worry about when they are doing a merge such as that?
So what I've found from my experience is that anytime there's a merger, the dev team is pretty tied up and they have their own items prioritized in the queue, and SEO usually falls to the wayside. So that's where we really step in and we make sure things like the redirect mapping, which is essential for the preservation of link equity, is all lined up perfectly. If you have a staging environment, that's even better. What we like to do is QA and make sure everything is functional prior to launch, and really just make sure everything is buttoned up. So essentially our job is to take care of the SEO piece so that you really don't have to think about it. All you have to do is execute on the changes that we recommend.
And how long does this kind of change take?
Mm-hmm. So I think lead time for a good migration is obviously, as much time as possible, but I'd say 4 to 6 months is probably ideal. And then once the site goes live, you're really going to want to keep a close eye on things for about 90 days, just to make sure that all the redirects are functioning properly. But if you do a site crawl right after the site launches, you can see if everything has essentially been set up with just a quick crawl. But usually about 90 days post-migration is when we can actually see true performance of how things played out.
Mm-hmm. So, that obviously is getting into some very technical stuff. Let's talk about a little bit more of the traffic side and how you are able to generate traffic with good SEO.
Mm-hmm. Sure, absolutely. So traffic through SEO, I think content is a huge piece of the pie here, because essentially what you want to do is be able to expand your keyword rankings outside of what I call your finite keyword set. So no matter what your brand is, there's always going to be certain keywords that are just relevant to, the products that you sell or what you offer. And so in order to really branch out of that, a blog is a really great addition to kind of add some content that plays around similar concepts, but is just outside the scope of your actual business offerings. And so the way to do that right for SEO is to go in with an informed strategy. And one of the things that I work on a lot with my clients is creating what we call a keyword map. So rather than arbitrarily just building pages and pushing out content once a week, what we do is a pretty deep dive competitive analysis called a gap analysis, where we'll actually take a look at what you're currently ranking for and how that stacks up against your competitors. And then we'll see where there's any gaps in your strategy, and we'll kind of build to fill those opportunities. And the way we do that is by providing a pretty structured content brief. So your writers could take it in-house. What we do on our end is provide some keyword guidance, and then we'll also mark up the page with things like metadata or structured data, which is something that you can use to gain a rich result snippet in the SERP.
Mm-hmm. So you really have a deep dive, like you said, and you look at where the opportunities are, and then you're giving it off to another content development team. Is that in-house, or does that usually, come within the company that you're dealing with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot of different options when it comes to the actual writing of the content. Some clients like to use their own internal copywriters, which is totally fine. Some people don't have the bandwidth for that, so they'll turn to us, and then we'll work with our team of writers to have them essentially, create the piece from start to finish.
So what kind of difference does it make then when you have all this content on the website? And when we're talking about sites like Target, they must have an astronomical amount of content on their sites.
Oh, sorry. Could you repeat the question?
What kind of difference does just a boatload of content basically make to the traffic and the sales on the site?
Mm-hmm. I think it comes down to what the size of your website is. So, for instance, Target, you have to remember that Target is ranking for millions of keywords. And if we were to put up a blog post, that's going to drive a very small percentage of SEO traffic. But when we're speaking to some of these smaller brands that have never had blog content and probably have anywhere between 5,000 and even 50,000 organic users per month, this is where the blog can really have the most impact, is for some of these smaller sites that don't already rank for a whole host of keywords.
So how does the blog work to improve the bottom line?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think firstly, the thing that you have to get right with a blog is the structure of how you integrate it into your website. And what I mean by that is a lot of clients get tempted to host their blogs on a subdomain. So for example, blog.yourwebsite.com. And the issue we have with this is that, yes, it might be easier for you to manage, but Google treats those subdomains as an entirely separate website, which means that it also has a separate domain authority. And the whole purpose of this blog is for that content that we're building to leverage that authority to help boost up our main marketing site. So first out of the gate, I would recommend switching that to a subdirectory or a subfolder. From a subdomain to a subfolder. So it would be something like yourwebsite.com/blog. And that's where all of the content can live.
So the blog basically is to just get more traffic to the website, and then you link it from there to the homepage?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would say the blog is definitely a traffic play, but it's also a great source of internal linking. If you're worried about metrics like bounce rate and time on site, blog can really help to improve that depth of content. Also just to be a little bit more informative for users. So if your site doesn't do a great job of speaking to top of funnel, it doesn't have a lot of information about your offerings, then a blog is a great way to just kind of instill another sense of confidence and really just put yourself out there as an authority on the topic. So maybe users aren't converting on your blog, but they're reading it, they're thinking about it, and then they're coming back to the site to make a purchase.
How important, Stephanie, is video content now as opposed to the written content on the page?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another good question. I mean, YouTube is the number 2 search engine right besides Google, and it is a Google-owned asset. So I think video definitely has its place. There's also structured data which you can leverage on your video content to actually make those results a little bit more noticeable in the SERP. On a whole, I think it kind of comes down to the client and what their capabilities are. If you have a strong video strategy, I would say we need to keep kind of building that momentum. But sometimes when clients don't have video at all on their website and we ask them to implement it, it is a bit of a heavy lift just from the perspective of filming it, scripting it, publishing it, managing it, sometimes building landing pages for it. And so while I do think it's growing in importance, I think that video is something that if you've been doing it, you should keep on with that strategy. But there's some more effective things we can do if video is not feasible for you at the moment.
Now, of course, mobile was a huge thing with SEO where, now we've got the mobile first algorithms, but how is voice going to impact SEO going forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question too. So voice search has been a really hot topic for a few years now, and I think Google has still kept it as much of in a black box as they can. There's not a whole lot of data for measuring voice search queries. What we know is that there's some differences between how people search on desktop versus how people search on mobile. The mobile queries tend to be a little bit shorter, a little bit more transactional, and a little bit more localized, whereas desktop, people are more in a browsing state of thought, and you get a lot of those more long tail queries. So based on what we know, there's no reports in Search Console that detail out queries for voice search or what people are actually typing in or saying. But I think over the next few years, there's going to be probably some improvements around this area. But right now, it's really hard to say since we just don't have any data behind those keywords.
Yeah, do you think it's going to go to more question-based searches, like you're asking Google or Siri a question rather than just typing in a couple of keywords?
Yeah, I think it is definitely aimed at questions. It's also interesting too when we think about those personal devices like Alexa and Google Home and the wealth of information that they have. And I think that those companies would probably be hard pressed to share that data with us unless Google Home wants to share some keywords with SEOs. But there's all this information being collected right now. It's just, how are they going to disseminate that to the public and then figuring out how we can actually use it.
All right. Well, what are some of the misconceptions or myths maybe that some of the companies that you work with have about SEO or what you're going to do for them?
Mm-hmm. So I think some companies that we work with, they find the budget for it and they think they'll just turn it on and maybe do it for a few months, get to a good point where traffic is looking pretty stable, and then really just scale back for the next year. It's easy to be flexible with a lot of different marketing channels. If you have budget for paid, you might turn it on. Display is not doing so well, you might turn it off. And it's hard to communicate that with SEO. It's really about the power of compounding growth. And you have to remember that if you're not consistently working on your SEO, your competition is working on theirs. And I think sometimes that's really hard to articulate to clients because ramping up and really seeing that positive change can take anywhere from about 3 to 6 months. Even when we're doing everything right and we're making those timely implementations, I think 6 months is usually the sweet spot where we start to really see that uptick in traffic. And from there, it's just about really maintaining that momentum.
So would you say at the start there's a really big push and you have to do a lot to get that movement and momentum, and then maybe just keeping it going with that maintenance, you don't have to do as much?
So we actually kind of steer away from saying that people should do maintenance because it's really so much more than that. Like maintenance might keep your traffic steady, but it's not going to help you grow. So it's always staying on top of, what's the next thing that we can do. But when we start working with a client, in order to really establish our baseline, we really take things right back to basics by doing a full site audit. So this is looking at everything like foundational, technical, analytics, rich media, on-page, off-page, literally everything that pertains to the site. We go through that over the course of about 2 months with a fine-tooth comb, and that really lays the landscape for us. So we'll prioritize everything critical, major, and minor. And that's usually where we start, is by tackling those, hard-hitting issues that really need to be fixed on a technical and foundational level. So once we've made those changes, we wait a few months. Google processes everything. Maybe we're at the 3-month mark at this point. We start working on some more content-focused tasks. And then once we hit that 6-month mark, we see a little bit of an uptick in traffic. And then, yes, of course, always maintaining, but always trying to see where we can kind of push the needle just a little bit further as well.
So there's definitely a lag between, starting an SEO campaign and seeing the results of it and being able to maintain it from there. But how does it relate to the pay-per-click, which is, mostly instant results?
Yep. We're always up against the results of PPC when speaking to our, points of contact on the client side. But I think people in time come to realize that there is a lot of value in SEO. When you're working with a paid search agency, they're going to be, charging you based on fees. So you're getting charged based on percentage of spend. Whereas SEO, we just really function based off of a retainer. And the initial upfront cost definitely scares a few people. But at the end of the day, if you really break it down and you look at the value that you're getting from organic, oftentimes, it's several times what you're paying an agency as your fee. So it really does actually pay off. Sometimes you just need to make that initial upfront investment.
And do you still advise to do both? Maybe you start with a pay-per-click campaign and you're getting traffic, you're getting momentum, and then all of a sudden the SEO kicks in and it's getting a bunch of traffic. Would you stop the pay-per-click, or you just keep it all rolling?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it would depend on your brand visibility already. If you're going for brand exposure, or if you're already a well-established brand. Obviously SEO can benefit you in several different ways besides just, organic performance. Because when you're thinking about things like PPC, you also have to take your quality score into account, right? So what you're going to pay for certain keywords is based on, quality overall of your website. There's several different ranking factors that go into that score, but having those really good optimized landing pages can really help to reduce your bid price.
So if that's the case and you're creating new landing pages for pay-per-click, is it an SEO optimized page? Is it going to be able to do both jobs, or do you have to create something specifically for the pay-per-click channels?
Mm-hmm. So usually for PPC, clients will create separate landing pages that are different from organic. Usually these will be a little bit more structured. They kind of want to guide people straight to a purchase, whereas an SEO landing page might be a little bit more informational. But PPC landing page, like one for email specifically, we'll just use that for example, might be a little bit more focused. And the reason that we create those separate ones is because we don't want them included in the index for searchers, because essentially they're serving a different purpose.
Okay. Well, there's certainly a lot to think about when it comes to driving traffic and having it convert. We haven't really had a chance to talk much about the conversion, but that's an extremely important part. What do you do to, help turn that traffic into sales?
So that is a good question. We do get a lot of clients asking, what do we do now that we have all this traffic coming to the site? And that's where things start to borderline a little bit more on the CRO side, or the conversion rate optimization side. So SEO does a great job of bringing people to the site and getting them there. And then CRO really seals the deal. It makes people want to purchase. And so I've been lucky enough to actually work with a lot of people at Elite that do CRO. I've actually become Optimizely certified, which is one of the testing platforms. There's several out there. There's Optimizely, there's VBO, you might have heard of, there's Google Optimize, a whole lot of different things to A/B test with. And through that, I try to provide some soft, suggestions to my clients about what they can A/B test, essentially. We can run the tests in-house ourselves, or the client can really take it upon themselves to do it too. But yeah, what we really look for on landing pages is what we call heat maps and hotspots. So I'm able to take a look at a landing page that's SEO optimized and see where users' attention is being focused. And typically where we want the focus to go is, the main product of the page, sometimes our H1, which might be our product name if we're speaking about an e-commerce site, and then also on the price and the add to cart button. And sometimes what you'll notice is that clients want to add so much content to the page. Maybe they have a slider, maybe they have a video widget, maybe their product description is super long, which could be great for SEO, but in terms of conversions, it might be super distracting to the user. So it's always a mix of trying to keep balance between SEO and CRO. But one of the things that I like to do is to just take a look at a page holistically and then provide them with some guidance around even the smallest of changes that can really have an impact. One of those examples might be just changing the color of the CTA, or even changing the color of the price, or even sizing or messaging. It can really just come down to the smallest details. And what clients really like to do is then run a test for about 4 to 6 weeks, or if you're using Optimizely, it has a really great built-in feature that automatically determines the statistical significance. So it will determine for you when the test is complete based on sample sizes. And with that data, our clients can really just go back to the drawing board and kind of iterate. And I've seen some of the best growth, both on the organic side and the conversion side, when clients really line up both SEO and CRO and kind of, work them at the same time.
Right. And, that's the debate now. I know that Google is putting more emphasis on that user experience. Does that mean that the actual words are being cut down on web pages now?
I still think that content is king, even though that's a very cliche line. Content will help you rank, but you also have to balance that user experience too. And I think that's where it becomes a little bit subjective, and that's where people struggle. But that's really where A/B tests shine, because they tell you exactly, what's needed, what helps people convert, and it can even show you elements of the page that people are completely glossing over. And maybe it's something that you thought was critical, but could be just, removed or minimized.
No, definitely a lot to think about, Stephanie. Working with you, obviously, is going to have its results. Are there any companies or examples that you'd like to share, what kind of results they've had by engaging Elite SEM to do the work for them?
Sure. So I can't really mention any specific brands, but just overall, one of the clients that I work on specifically came in about 3 years ago, I would say now, relatively small site. Their business is equipment financing, and I think they were ranking for about 100 keywords total. And this is a company that does deals that are about $30,000 on average. So we're not talking about a small amount of money at all. The site's lead gen, and they'd been around for about 20 years, but the website, had only been around maybe a decade. And we've been working with them now for 3 years. And through this kind of very structured content strategy, this landing page strategy we've put together, we've actually managed to grow their rankings somewhere into, I think we're up to a few thousand keyword rankings. And this is from just, under 100 a few years ago. And because of this, we're actually able to measure the organic applications that are coming in, through their Salesforce platform. And we've had, several deals come in every single month. As I mentioned, on average, it's about $30,000 when one of them signs. So as you can see right there, it more times over, pays for the SEO fee with just one deal.
Yes, and definitely. Well, those kinds of numbers are extremely important. And if you're all of a sudden ranking, or maybe not even all of a sudden, but still it's worth the time investment to put into a great SEO campaign to get the results that you're talking about. So, Stephanie, if people want to reach out to yourself and Elite SEM, what is the best way for them to do that?
The best way to get in contact is my email, which is just stephanie@elitesem.com, or you could always just give me a phone call if needed.
Excellent. Well, Stephanie, you certainly have a wealth of knowledge about all things SEO, and I know there's many people out there that just need the experience and the expertise that somebody like yourself have. So thank you very much for being my guest on the Trust Factor Radio today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And to our listening audience, if you like what you hear, hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
You've been listening to the Trust Factor Radio with Neil Howe. To learn about the resources mentioned in the show and to listen to past episodes, go to thetrustfactorradio.com. To get a copy of the book, The Trust Factor, go to thetrustfactorbook.com. If you are ready to act now and build your authority, credibility, and trust, schedule a consultation with Neil at theauthorityarchitect.com.